Hello, today we will continue with our chapter 4 from the book Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. In a dingy public house called Three Cripples, in one of the dirtiest and meanest part of London, Little Saffron Hill, William Sykes sat, brooding over a drink. His dog, Bullseye, lay at his feet licking a cut. The dog periodically lifted his head and looked at his master, its eyes winking. Whether it was his black mood or the fact that he was irritated by the dog's winking, Sykes suddenly lashed out with his leg and kicked the dog. It was in an equally bad temper, for instead of cringing as it usually did, it growled and gave Sykes' leg a quick nip. Sykes picked up a pewter pot and flung it at the dog, which dodged it by hiding under the bed. "You would bite me, would you?" he shouted, grasping a poker in one hand and a large clasp knife in the other. "Come here, you vermin!" The dog growled louder and took a poker between its teeth, trying to pull it out of his master's hand. Sykes was provoked further by this, and kneeling down, began beating the dog viciously. The dog jumped from side to side, growling, barking, and nipping. The door suddenly opened and Bullseye rushed out. "What the devil do you mean by coming between me and my dog?" Sykes demanded of the newcomer. It was Fagin, and he smiled uneasily. I didn't know, my dear, I didn't know." "Well, what have you got for me, you evil old man?" Fagin drew an old handkerchief from his pocket. Tied in one corner of this was a brown packet, which he handed over to Sykes. There were some souvenirs, gold coins, in it, which Sykes started counting. "Is it all? Are you sure you haven't stolen one or two on your way here?" asked Sykes with a frown. "That's all, my dear. You know I wouldn't stoop to something so dishonest," replied Fagin with a forced laugh. Sykes ordered Barney, another young Jew, and equally evil-looking, who ran the pub, to bring him a refill. "Is there anybody else here?" asked Fagin of Barney. "Nobody but Nancy. She's eating at the bar." "Nancy, call her here," said Sykes. "Nancy, call her here." When Nancy came in, she was dressed in the same disguise as she had been when she went to the magistrate's office. "You're on the trial, eh, Nancy?" said Sykes. "Yes, Bill, and getting tired of it. The young un has been ill and in bed for the past few weeks, and—" She broke off as Fagin raised his eyebrow at her warning not to talk too much. "Well," she continued, pulling her shawl over her shoulders, "I'm on my way." She went out of the pub, followed by Sykes. The dog slunk out of the yard near the pub and followed them. Fagin shook his fist at Sykes, departing back, a look of murderous rage in his eyes. Oliver hadn't lied when he had said that he knew the way to the bookshop. He ran all the way down to the Clerkwen Street. Then, in his hurry, he took a wrong turn into the side road. He could have traced his path back, and then maybe his destiny would have been written differently. He continued on his way, however. He was aware of that the road met up with the main street further. He walked quickly, his head down, the packet of books clutched under his arm. He was thinking of the fortune that had smiled upon him, and wished that he could meet little Dick and help him too. He got shook of his life when two arms were thrown around his neck, and a woman cried out, "Oliver! Nolly! My little brother! Where have you been? Thank God I found you!" Oliver struggled to escape from the clinging arms of the young woman in a bonnet and with a basket on her arms. "Who are you?" he cried. "I don't know you. Why are you stopping me?" She told some curious passerby who had paused to watch. "He ran away from home and almost broke poor mother's heart. Here is he up to no good. Come back home this instant, you cruel boy." And she broke into a hysterical fit of weeping, so loud and violent that the man asked if they should not call a doctor. "Young wretch," said one woman. "Go home, you little brute," said another. "I am not a wretch. I don't know what she is talking about," said Oliver, wrenching himself free. "I don't know her. I don't have parents or a sister. I'm an orphan, and I live in Pentonville." "Look at him, how brazen is he!" exclaimed the young woman. Then Oliver saw her face for the first time. "Why, it's Nancy," he said with a gasp. He could not help himself, and the cry escaped his lips. "See," pleaded Nancy on the onlookers. "He knows me. Come home at once, Oliver." "What the devil's this?" said a man bursting out of the beer shop. "Here, come home to your mother, young Oliver." And Sikes got hold of Oliver's arm and started dragging him away. "Help! I don't know these people," Oliver shouted. "I do not belong to them. Help me!" Sikes wrenched the book out of Oliver's hand and gave him a blow on the head. "Stealing again, yeah? I'll teach you." "That's right," said the two women. "That will do him some good. Come along, you young vagabond. Here, Bullseye, mind him," said Sikes. Oliver was weak from his recent illness, stunned by the blow and the suddenness of what happened, terrified of the growling dog and the brute force of the man. What could one small little boy do? His cries for help fell on deaf ears because it was a seedy neighborhood. He was quickly taken by Nancy and Sikes through a maze of dark alleys at such a pace that he could hardly gather breath to let out but the faintest of squeaks. It soon grew too dark to see, and still Mr. Brownlow and Grimwig sat across the table as the light dimmed and Oliver did not return. Mr. Brownlow's heart grew heavier. Mrs. Bedwin, who had been reluctant from the first to let Oliver go, paced up and down 100 times outside the front door, anxiety clutching her heart, praying that nothing had happened to her dear sweet boy. Chapter 5. An Evil Plan. Sikes and Nancy brought Oliver to another of Fagin's dens, equally dark and dismal as the earlier one. Oliver thought he could make a break for it, but there were hardly any people about it. Sikes saw his hesitation. "Don't you think of it," he said with a threatening growl. "Bullseye will be at your throat in an instant if you try to run." Oliver was pushed into the house and hustled up the stairs. Charlie Bates rolled on the floor laughing when he saw Oliver. Fagin turned his grinning face and said, "Welcome back, dear Oliver. We would have arranged for some food had we known you were coming." "Look at the fine clothes he is wearing," said Dodger. "Quite the gentleman." "You must not spoil your Sunday suit, dear," said Fagin. Charlie gave him his old clothes. The Jew who had taken away Oliver's old clothes from Mr. Brownlow's house had come upon Fagin by chance when he was carrying them away. In fact, he was the one who had told Fagin of the boy's location. A £5 note was appropriated by Sikes as payment for the work he had done in kidnapping Oliver. He said the Jew could keep the books. "Oh, please return the books, I beg you," I pleaded Oliver, falling at Fagin's feet. "They are such good people. Mr. Brownlow will think I stole them. Mrs. Bedwin will be heartbroken. They will think I'm a thief." Well, chuckled Fagin. "Isn't that rather our advantage, Oliver? They will not look for you if they think you have come to us. They will not complain to the police either." Oliver sobbed wretchedly. He then got up and looked wildly around. He made a dash for the door and ran out screaming for help till his voice echoed in the rafter. Sikes would have set the dog on him if Nancy had not stepped up and closed the door. She stood against it. "No, I will not let the boy be savaged," she cried, pinning Sikes' arms. "You have to kill me first." Sikes cursed and struggled out of her grasp. "What's come over you?" he fumed. By this time, Fagin and the two boys had persuaded Oliver and returned with him. "What's up?" he asked Sykes. "The girl's gone mad," he replied. "No, she hasn't, Fagin, she hasn't," said Nancy, breathing hard. "Then keep quiet, will you?" Fagin replied. "No, I will not. What will you do if I don't?" To distract her attention, Fagin turned to Oliver. "Run away, will you? Call the police for help, will you? I will set you straight." He took up a stout and knotted club and gave Oliver a smart blow on his shoulder. He raised it again, but Nancy snatched it from his hands and threw it into the fire. "I won't stand by and see it done. Isn't it enough that you have the child? Let him be, or I will do one of you such harm that I may be hanged for it." She stamped her foot, and lips were pressed tightly together, and her face deeply pale. "What do you mean by this, you Harrington?" said Sykes in a menacing tone. "Have you forgotten what you are, and where are you from?" "No, I haven't," replied Nancy, laughing hysterically. "I haven't indeed." "Why this sudden feeling of humanity, then?" demanded the robber, his voice dripping sarcasm. "You will make a pretty friend for this child, as you call him." "I wish I had no hand in bringing him here," said Nancy passionately. "He will be a thief, a liar, and that's all bad from this night on. Isn't that enough for the old wretch without beating him?" Come, Nancy," said the Jew. "No harsh words. Be nice to me, my dear." "Nice?" retorted Nancy. "Nice to someone who introduced me to evil when I was as old as Oliver here. For 12 years I have been thieving for you." Yes, my dear," blasted the Jew. "That is your living now, my dear." "Yes, it is my living, you wretch," screamed the girl. "The cold, wet, dirty streets are my home, and you are the one who drove me to it, and will keep me here till the day I die." "Now mind your words, my dear, or I will do you harm, a great harm," warned Fagin. At this, Nancy flung herself on the Jew, and would have done scratched his face had Sykes not caught both her wrists and restrained her, upon which she fainted and dead away. Fagin told the boys to see Oliver to bed, glad that the crisis had blown over. Oliver's suit was taken away from him, and he slept in the same clothes that he thought he had got rid of forever. An incident occurred which served to lower Mr. Brownlow's opinion of Oliver even further. Mr. Bumble, the beadle, had occasion to travel to London. He was accompanying 2 criminals who had to appear before a magistrate. When he reached London, he settled into his hotel room and opened the newspaper to read after dinner. An advertisement caught his eye. 5 guineas reward. A reward of 5 guineas will be given to anyone who can provide information about an orphan, Oliver Twist, who has either been enticed or has run away from Pentonville. Contact Brownlow. Mr. Bumble did not even finish his nightcap of gin and hot water. He put on his cocked hat and left immediately for Pentonville. He arrived there out of breath and ushered into the study where sat Mr. Brownlow and Grimwig. "What can you tell us about Oliver Twist? Was he a boy of bad character?" asked Mr. Brownlow. Mr. Bumble nodded gravely. "He said that Oliver Twist has run away after assaulting the undertaker's assistant, who had almost died. He was a vicious, ill-mannered boy who was a bad influence on the other orphan, and who deserved to be hanged." Mr. Brownlow was deeply disturbed to hear this. "I would have given you more than 5 guineas had I heard a good account of Oliver," he said, handing over the money to Mr. Bumble. The beadle was startled. He would have sung Oliver's praises had he known of his beforehand, but it was too late now. There were heavy hearts at Pentonville at that night, although Mrs. Bedwin refused stoutly to believe that Oliver was bad. "Oliver is a sweet, gentle soul," she maintained. "I have brought up my children, and I know an ill-disposed child when I see one." "Never mention his name again in this house," said Mr. Brownlow. I wish to God that I have never set eyes on the boy. Oliver's heart had sunk at that thought that his benefactors would consider him a thief. It would have broken him outright had he known what they felt now. When the boys had left the next afternoon on their usual thieving forays, Fagin sat beside Oliver and impressed upon him that it would be best for him to stay here and learn how to live a life of a crime like other boys. He reminded him of how he had taken him in when he had been hungry and friendless in the great city. He said that Oliver was ungrateful to try to escape. One of my boys did that, and he came to a bad end. He was hanged. Oliver trembled and turned white, and this seemed to give a boost to Fagin's mood. Mind, Oliver, that you don't try that again, he said. Oliver was left alone in the house for many weeks, and he took to wandering the dirty, empty rooms of what had evidently once been a gentleman's residence. He felt so lonely sometimes that he sat in the passage next to the locked street door, listening to the voice of people outside. When Dodger and Charlie visited, he was happy to see their faces. They tried to persuade Oliver to accept his life and to learn how to become a pickpocket and thief. At other times, Fagin would play a game with the boys and regale the company with the stories of robberies that he had been involved in. Some of the tales were so absurd that Oliver could not help laughing. Thus it was that Fagin set into motion the process of gradually transforming Oliver, infusing him with the poison of evil thoughts and deeds, so that one day he would join them, never to leave. One evening, not long after Fagin paid Sykes a visit, both of them hatched a plan to rob a country house of its huge quantity of silver. The house was well guarded, and they had not been able to infiltrate it through the servant as they normally did. The servants were too loyal to the owners and could not be bribed or threatened. There was only one entry to the house, a small, secured window at the back, at the height of 5 feet from the ground, which had not been secured because the owner thought it was too small for anyone to enter. However, reason Sykes, a small boy, could let into the house, it to open the front door for Sykes and accomplice. A job, Fagin decided, that was ideal for Oliver. That night, before he was to be taken to Sykes, Fagin stopped by. He told Oliver that Sykes wanted him and that Nancy would come to fetch him the following day. When Oliver inquired timidly as to why he had to go, Fagin patted him on the head and said it was just a small job. Oliver assumed it was to do some menial work for the housebreaker. Careful of Bill Sykes, though, Oliver. He does not think twice before murder if his blood is up, said Fagin, shaking his finger. Don't provoke him. He left Oliver, handing him an old dog-eared book to read to pass the time. When Oliver read it, his blood ran cold. The book was full of stories about robbers, murders, hardened criminals, and their heinous crime. It made him shiver with dread. He threw the book aside, put his head in his hand, and started praying with fervor. Please, God, get me away from these people, or let me die. On the appointed night, Oliver was taken to Sykes' house by Nancy. She seemed agitated and pale. When Oliver asked her if she was well and what they were going for, she laughed uneasily. For no good, Oliver, she replied, for no good. Oliver was frightened. He thought of appealing to her good nature, since he had noticed that Nancy had a soft corner for him. It seemed she had read his mind. I can't do anything to help you, dear, she said. If I did anything, they would not rest till they killed me and you. We both would be in danger. So because he liked Nancy and did not wish her harm, he went quietly with her, not daring to make a run for it or ask passers-by for help. When they reached the robber's house, he was given some supper and asked to sleep. Early in the morning, Sykes boarded a carriage, pretending to be a coachman, that Oliver was his son. They travelled a long way and then stopped at a derelict house near Chertsey. Here, Sykes met up with his partner in crime, Toby Crackit, the Jew Barney who managed the bar at Three Cripples, the same one from where Sykes had emerged to help Nancy kidnap Oliver, was there to provide with food. He already drugged the dog at the mansion so that it was out of the way. At around 2 past midnight, Sykes and Crackit prepared to leave. They dressed Oliver in a coat. Each of them held one of his hand and set off at a rapid cliff for the mansion. They had planned to rob. Oliver was nervous, and more than once he had to stop because he was out of breath. Soon they reached a garden wall. Toby was up in a second and waited for Sykes to hand Oliver up. Then Sykes followed. As soon as they jumped down on the other side, Oliver glimpsed the house in the distance. He realized what they had come for. Housebreaking, robbery, maybe even murder. He fell on his knees in terror. Please, please don't make me do this, he pleaded, in an agony of fear. For God's sakes, let me go, but don't force me to rob. I will run away into the fields. I will never come near London again. Come on, you sneering rascal, said Sykes, pulling him up roughly, furious that Fagin had given him such a weak boy. This is no time for objections. And he put his pistol to Oliver's head, pressing it in. Crackit pushed Sykes' hands away and cursed. None of that now, Bill. He will soon come to his senses, or I will give him a crack on his head myself. Boys older than him have been frightened the first time. Listen up, young Oliver, said Sykes gruffly. I will put you down into the room, and you will go up to the stairs to the passage and open the street door for us. Don't try any tricks. I have my pistol aimed at you all the way. Do you understand? Yes, sir, gasped Oliver, almost dead with cold and fear. As he came to his senses, he thought of going up to the stairs, waking up the owner of the house, even if he died in an attempt. Sykes pried open the lattice window with a crowbar, then stood on Crackit's shoulder and lifted Oliver up. He let him in down through the opening into a tiny room. 2 steps led into the passage. Sykes held him by the collar of his coat. He handed him the lantern. Do you see the stairs? Now, as soon as I let you go, tread as silently as a mouse and open the street door over there, he said. Get up on one of the hall chairs to reach the balls. Oliver crept up the stairs, his head full of the ideas of sounding an alarm. Sykes caught on to his intention because he had said in a loud voice, Stop! Come back! Back! Startled by the sound in the quiet stillness of the night, which followed by a cry from the top of the hall, the stairways, Oliver dropped the lantern and stood there, not knowing whether to advance or retreat. 2 half-dressed men appeared. There was another cry, a flash of light, and a bang. Sykes reached down and lifted Oliver up. He fired at the men who were already retreating, and then pulled Oliver out of the window. They have hit him! My God, how the boy bleeds! Here, Toby, tie this shawl around his arm. There were shouts of men, the ringing of fire bells, and a confused clamour. Oliver felt himself being carried away across the field at great speed. A cold feeling crept up along his arm and to his heart, and then he knew no more.